There are places in the world that hide mysteries so profound they defy our understanding, truths that camouflage themselves behind seemingly innocent facades. Among these places are the temples of a religious organization that many superficially know as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Beneath an appearance of kindness and altruism, carefully constructed over decades, lies a dark network of macabre practices, sacrificial rituals, and a devotion to something far beyond any conventional notion of faith. This is not just a story about religion, but about control, manipulation, and terror. It is not about condemning beliefs, but exposing a hidden side that few dare to investigate. Over the years, accounts of unexplained disappearances, bloody rituals, and a connection to supernatural forces have begun to emerge. Dissidents, survivors, and even former missionaries have shared fragments of this disturbing reality, risking everything to reveal the truth. The temples, symbols of faith for followers, are in fact the centers of a meticulously organized global network. In their most secret chambers, ancient insignias glow in candlelight, pulsating altars respond to spilled blood, and chants in forgotten languages echo, summoning something not of this world. The entity known as collab is the core of it all, a voracious force that demands pain, fear, and sacrifice. To those outside this reality, the cult seems harmless, even benevolent. Humanitarian missions, well-dressed young men and women knocking on doors, entire communities being helped. But the price of this aid is high. Behind the smile of a missionary might lurk the shadow of someone who has seen the unexplainable, but does not know how to escape. Behind the generous donation lies the blood of victims who will never return to their families. At first glance, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints seems like an ordinary organization. Polite and dedicated missionaries knock on doors offering comforting words, while social projects demonstrate generosity and care for the needy. Yet beneath this veneer of faith and goodness lies something much darker. The true face of this church is hidden, protected by a carefully constructed facade built over years. What hides behind the walls of its temples is not the pursuit of salvation, but something terrifying and inexplicable. The leaders of this organization exercise absolute control over what happens within it. The hierarchy is rigid, and only the most loyal and trusted ascend to the levels where the real secrets are revealed. For most followers, the church seems merely a place of spiritual communion, but those chosen for the inner circles know they are dealing with forces beyond the physical world. This strict control prevents information from leaking, keeping the public unaware of what happens in the shadows. The church is a master of manipulating public perception. Its donations to impoverished communities and humanitarian programs create an image of altruism and kindness. However, these actions often conceal a darker purpose, infiltrating vulnerable areas to establish dominance. Targeted communities often disappear following the church's involvement, but these events are quickly covered up with convincing explanations. The cult operates like a precise machine, always several steps ahead. The temples are the heart of the organization, places where its darkest secrets are kept. Each building is designed with restricted areas, such as attics and basements, that no one outside the inner circle may access. These spaces hide altars, ancient inscriptions, and artifacts used in macabre rituals. The structures themselves seem designed to amplify the energy of their dark acts. Those who dare question the purpose of these places are swiftly silenced. Missionaries, often young and idealistic, are used as tools to promote the church's facade. They work with dedication, believing they are spreading God's word and helping the needy. However, many are instructed to gather detailed information about the communities they visit, unaware that they are contributing to the cult's sinister plans. Few know the truth until it is too late, and when they discover it, escape is nearly impossible. The cult's true face is known only to those who manage to escape. Dissidents and former members frequently recount horrifying stories of manipulation, violence, and supernatural practices. Despite their efforts to warn the world, the church's facade continues to shield its operations. It is a chilling reminder that evil can hide behind the most innocent and appealing appearances. The rituals performed in the temples are the core of the cult's activities. These events are meticulously planned, carried out on hidden altars, and involve human sacrifices. The victims, often chosen from vulnerable communities or members deemed unworthy, are sacrificed in dark ceremonies. During the ritual, chants in ancient languages echo through the walls, and spilled blood activates inscriptions that glow with a supernatural light. It is a terrifying experience, even for those who believe in the cause. The selection of victims is a meticulous process. The church uses information gathered by missionaries to identify vulnerable individuals who can disappear without raising suspicion. In other cases, members of the organization who break rules or question leadership are marked for the rituals. These sacrifices are presented as acts of purification, but in reality, they serve a far darker purpose, feeding the entity known as collab. The atmosphere during the rituals is suffocating. The room is lit only by torches or candles, casting shadows that seem to move on their own. The chants create a sense of oppression, as if something invisible is watching everything. When the sacrifice occurs, the air grows heavier, and many participants enter a trance, as though under the control of an external force. Survivors report that the sensation of a malevolent presence is impossible to ignore. The leaders justify these rituals with speeches about divine order and spiritual necessity. They claim the sacrifices are essential to ensure the church's protection and growth. Many members, though disturbed, accept this explanation, fearing the consequences of questioning it. The indoctrination is so deep that even the most skeptical eventually comply, participating in or witnessing the rituals without resistance. Inscriptions carved on the altars and walls of the temples play a significant role in the rituals. When blood comes into contact with these symbols, they seem to come alive, emitting light and heat. Some survivors believe these inscriptions channel the energy of the sacrifice to collab. The symbol's reaction is seen as a sign that the ritual was successful, reinforcing the participants' belief in the ceremony's effectiveness. These rituals are not merely acts of violence. They are part of a carefully planned system to sustain the cult's power. Each sacrifice strengthens the connection to collab and increases the organization's influence. To the outside world, these practices remain invisible, protected by the facade of kindness and faith. But for those who witness them, the impact is devastating and impossible to forget. Collab is a name that frequently appears in the cult's texts, chants, and rituals. At first glance, it seems to be merely a theological concept, described as a celestial force or a sacred place near God. However, the church's deepest secrets reveal that collab is far more than an abstract idea. It is an entity that demands sacrifices and blood, a force beyond human comprehension. The cult's leaders claim that collab is the source of power and protection for the church. They believe that by performing sacrifices and conducting rituals, they please the entity and strengthen their connection to it. However, dissidents who have escaped describe collab differently. To them, it is not a benevolent god, but a destructive and insatiable force that consumes more than it offers. During the rituals, collab's presence is intensely felt. Many participants report a sense of oppression, as if something invisible is filling the room. Some claim to see shadows moving independently, while others describe whispers coming from all directions. These manifestations make it clear that collab is not just an idea, but a real and frightening force. The ancient texts used in the rituals suggest that collab does not belong to this world. There are frequent references to higher dimensions or alternate planes where the entity resides. It is believed that the temples function as portals, channeling its energy into our world. These concepts blend religion, occultism, and science in a disturbing way, creating a unique and dangerous belief system. Those who survive the rituals often report nightmares and feelings of being followed. Even far from the temples, many believe collab continues to watch them, as if an invisible bond has been formed. This constant fear reinforces the cult's control over its members, who come to believe there is no escape from the entity's influence. Collab remains the greatest mystery of the cult. Its nature and intentions are unknown, but its influence is undeniable. Whether as a force, concept, or entity, collab lies at the center of everything the church does. Understanding this mystery is crucial to uncovering the organization's darkest secrets. The cult's network of temples forms the backbone of its global operation. Spread across multiple continents, these temples are not just places of worship, but centers of strategic activity. They are positioned in carefully chosen locations, often with historical significance or energetic alignments. Each structure follows a specific architectural design, concealing restricted areas intended for rituals and dark practices. These temples are mysteriously interconnected, functioning as points in a larger network. The cult uses this network to discreetly move resources, people, and information. Victims destined for rituals are transported between temples to avoid suspicion, while artifacts and secret documents circulate through protected channels. Many of these temples have tunnels or underground passages connecting inaccessible areas. These hidden systems reinforce the idea that the cult operates in a parallel dimension, beyond the reach of conventional laws. Rituals performed in one temple are often connected to those in others. Survivors have reported that simultaneous sacrifices in different temples appear to amplify the effects of the ceremonies. This suggests that the network is designed to function as an interconnected machine, where each temple contributes to a larger purpose. This global coordination is made possible by the cult's rigid hierarchy, which maintains absolute control over all operations. In addition to ritualistic practices, the temples also serve as centers of political and economic power. Regional leaders frequently meet in these locations, often under the guise of religious protection. These secret meetings involve agreements that benefit both the church and local authorities. Thus, the temples not only sustain the cult's spiritual practices, but also reinforce its influence in the real world. The financing of the cult's global network of temples is impressive. Large sums of money flow through charitable donations, shell companies, and international bank transfers. This complex financial system ensures that new temples are built in strategic areas while existing ones remain operational. This economic structure also serves to shield the cult's leaders from any external scrutiny. The global network of temples is far more than a collection of religious buildings. It represents a meticulous system designed to sustain the cult and strengthen its connection to collab. Each temple is a vital piece of this macabre puzzle, contributing to a plan that seems to transcend the boundaries of our world. Understanding how this network operates is crucial to exposing the true extent of the cult. Mass disappearances are a hallmark of the cult's presence in certain regions. Whenever a temple is established, entire communities begin to vanish inexplicably. These events are often covered up with superficial explanations, such as economic crises or regional conflicts. However, the patterns of disappearance align with the church's expansion, suggesting a direct connection between the two. The victims of these disappearances are often from vulnerable communities where people have little or no external support. Missionaries are sent to these areas, gathering detailed information about the residents. This data includes names, ages, occupations, and even the locations of their homes. Armed with this information, the church can select victims without raising suspicion, removing them gradually. Survivors have reported witnessing trucks arriving in these communities at night. These vehicles, often bearing the church's logos, transport people to unknown destinations. Those who tried to resist were quickly silenced, either by force or threats. Entire families have disappeared, leaving behind only empty homes and unanswered questions. These actions have created a climate of fear in many regions where the church operates. Local authorities often turn a blind eye to the disappearances. In many cases, there is evidence that political or police leaders are involved in covering them up. The church uses its financial and political influence to ensure investigations are halted before they even begin. This creates a cycle of impunity, allowing the disappearances to continue without any external interference. In addition to mass disappearances, there are cases of individuals who mysteriously vanish after coming into contact with the church. Many of these missing individuals were critics of the organization or expressed doubts about its practices. Dissidents and former members are also frequent targets, with their absences often recorded as spiritual returns in internal documents. The true extent of these practices remains hidden. The disappearances are grim evidence of the cult's inner workings. They reveal how the church uses its religious facade to conceal systematic operations of abuse and violence. Each missing person is a reminder of the lengths the organization is willing to go to protect its secrets. While the world ignores these events, the cult continues to expand its influence. The cult's influence extends far beyond religious spheres. Behind its facade of humility and altruism, the church maintains deep connections with political and economic leaders in various parts of the world. These strategic relationships ensure that its operations remain protected while expanding its network of influence. The church acts as a powerful player behind the scenes, shaping decisions that favor its interests. Local governments often receive financial support or direct benefits from the church. In return, political leaders either ignore or actively facilitate the cult's practices. Leaked documents indicate that some of these collaborations include protection from investigations and land grants for the construction of new temples. This mutually beneficial relationship reinforces the cycle of impunity that shields the cult. Beyond local authorities, the church has ties with major corporations and financial institutions. Shell companies are used to launder money, and fund global operations. Many of these businesses are registered in tax havens, making it impossible to trace the flow of resources. This complex financial system sustains the church's expansion while hiding the true nature of its activities. The church also employs public relations campaigns to control its image. Charity events, social projects, and international conferences are used to promote an appearance of goodwill and legitimacy. These efforts not only attract new members, but also make it difficult for allegations against the cult to gain credibility. Media manipulation is a powerful tool to silence critics and reinforce the public facade. High-ranking political leaders frequently participate in private ceremonies held in the temples. These meetings, often conducted under strict confidentiality, involve agreements that benefit both the cult and the participating leaders. There are indications that some of these politicians also take part in the rituals, solidifying their loyalty to the church. This demonstrates the organization's reach, transcending cultural and geographical barriers. The cult's connections to politics and economics are among its greatest weapons. They allow the church to operate with impunity while amassing power and resources on a global scale. Breaking this web of influence is essential to exposing the cult's dark practices, but it is a monumental task given the depth of its roots within the system. The church primarily targets the world's most vulnerable regions, areas marked by poverty, conflict, and isolation. Under the guise of humanitarian aid, it infiltrates these communities with promises of material and spiritual support. However, these promises often conceal sinister objectives. The lack of infrastructure and protective systems in these areas facilitates the church's actions, which face little to no resistance. Missionaries arrive in these regions offering basic services such as food, medicine, and education. Initially, the community welcomes them as saviors, unaware of the true purpose behind their assistance. During their visits, the missionaries collect detailed information about the inhabitants, including names, ages, occupations, and the locations of their homes. This data is shared with cult leaders and used to identify potential targets for their rituals. Vulnerable zones are also chosen for their symbolic significance. Many of the temples built in these areas are located on sites considered sacred or with a history of ancient spiritual practices. Survivors have reported that rituals performed in these temples seem to have heightened intensity, as if the very ground is imbued with a special energy. These characteristics make these areas ideal for the cult's dark practices. Additionally, the church exploits the lack of oversight in these regions to operate with total impunity. In isolated communities, local authorities often lack the resources or will to investigate disappearances. In many cases, political leaders or police officers are bribed by the church to cover up its activities. This creates an environment where the cult can act freely without fear of repercussions. Mass disappearances are common in vulnerable areas. Entire communities report the loss of families and neighbors, often during the night, without any explanation. When questioned, the church often attributes these disappearances to voluntary migration or humanitarian relocation. However, survivors claim these people are taken to remote temples, where they become victims of the rituals. The church's influence in these zones is devastating. It not only destroys entire communities, but also exploits the vulnerability of these populations as a tool to achieve its dark objectives. While the world remains unaware of what happens in these places, the cult continues to expand, turning suffering into power. The church's temples are filled with symbols and inscriptions that go far beyond decorative elements. Etched into altars, walls, and artifacts, these symbols hold meanings that trace back to the occult practices of ancient civilizations. They appear to be part of a ritualistic system designed to channel energy and invoke supernatural forces. Often overlooked by common members, these inscriptions are central to the cult's practices. During rituals, these symbols react in inexplicable ways. Survivors report that when the victim's blood touches the inscriptions on the altars, they begin to glow, emitting an intense and unnatural light. This reaction suggests that the symbols are not merely ornamental, but act as conduits for energy, capable of activating supernatural phenomena. This reinforces the leader's belief in the effectiveness of the rituals. The books used by the cult also contain these symbols, often accompanied by chants and detailed descriptions of rituals. Bound in materials resembling human skin, these texts are written in ancient and unknown languages. Only the highest-ranking leaders have access to these books, which adds to the mystique surrounding them. Some believe these inscriptions were transmitted by collab as direct instructions for the rituals. Artifacts used during ceremonies, such as ceremonial knives and amulets, also bear these symbols. During the rituals, these items often glow or vibrate as if responding to the energy around them. Missionaries who touched these artifacts without permission reported feelings of nausea, intense fear, and even hallucinations. These objects seem to have a direct connection to the forces invoked by the cult. The symbols are also used as marks on victims and dissidents. Survivors often bear scars in the form of these symbols, suggesting they were branded as belonging to the cult. Many report that these marks bring nightmares and feelings of being watched, as if the symbols are more than just physical carvings. They seem to create an invisible bond between the victim and the entity collab. The symbolism within the temples is not merely aesthetic. It is part of a ritualistic language that combines magic, religion, and occultism. Deciphering these inscriptions is crucial to understanding the extent of the cult's power and its connection to collab. However, any attempt to study them closely is extremely dangerous, as the cult protects its secrets with brutal measures. The few who have managed to escape the cult's grip provide terrifying accounts of what they witnessed. Former missionaries, residents of targeted communities, and even dissident leaders reveal details that defy comprehension. Their stories often include macabre rituals, psychological manipulation, and the constant feeling of being watched. These testimonies are fragments of a reality the cult goes to great lengths to keep hidden. Missionaries often join the church filled with faith, believing they are fulfilling a divine calling. However, many end up being exposed to the cult's true nature. Some recount the shock of witnessing their first rituals, where chants in unknown languages and human sacrifices leave them paralyzed with fear. They describe a sense of powerlessness, knowing that any attempt at resistance could turn them into the next victims. Residents of vulnerable communities also recount horrifying experiences. Entire families disappear during the night as trucks bearing the church's logos arrive for relocations. Survivors speak of neighbors who were never seen again and disturbing sounds emanating from the temples. Many believe their loved ones were sacrificed, but live in fear of speaking openly. This silence is reinforced by the church's power over local authorities. Dissidents from the leadership offer the most detailed and chilling accounts. They describe the cult's hierarchy, where only the most loyal gain access to its deepest secrets. Many speak of collab as a real and terrifying entity, whose presence is felt during rituals. These dissidents also expose the cult's connections to political and economic power, explaining how the organization operates without restrictions. The traumas faced by survivors are devastating. Many suffer from constant nightmares, hallucinations, and post-traumatic stress disorder. They live in fear of being found by the cult, which frequently pursues those who try to expose its secrets. Even so, some risk everything to share their stories, believing that the truth must be revealed. The testimonies of these witnesses are crucial to understanding the true nature of the cult. They provide a glimpse into a world of terror that remains hidden beneath a facade of faith and charity. Each testimony is a piece of a larger puzzle, exposing an organization devoted to dark and destructive practices. Missionaries are the cult's public face, charismatic young people who dedicate years of their lives to spreading the church's message. They are trained to appear confident, kind, and compassionate, attracting new members and bolstering the organization's reputation. However, these young individuals also play a critical role in the cult's darker objectives, often without realizing it. They are essential tools in a carefully designed machine of manipulation. One of the missionaries' most important roles is gathering information. During their visits to communities, they record detailed data, including names, ages, occupations, and home locations. Although presented as part of humanitarian logistics, this information is used to identify potential victims. Missionaries, often naive, believe they are contributing to a noble cause, unaware they are participating in something horrific. In addition to data collection, missionaries are tasked with building emotional connections with communities. They engage in local activities, offer support, and become trusted figures. This facilitates the church's acceptance in these areas, creating an environment where the cult can operate without resistance. The emotional and material dependency fostered by the missionaries is crucial for ensuring the organization's control over these communities. Some missionaries, however, are drawn into direct participation in rituals. When they gain higher levels of trust within the hierarchy, they are invited to spiritual renewal ceremonies. These events, initially presented as acts of faith, turn out to be dark rituals involving human sacrifices. Many missionaries are shocked when they witness these practices, but are forced to continue under the threat of reprisals. Those who attempt to question or resist face severe consequences. Missionaries who hesitate are labeled as unworthy and often become the next ritual victims. Others simply disappear, with their absences explained as transfers or desertion. This atmosphere of fear and psychological control keeps missionaries aligned with the cult's objectives, even as their convictions begin to falter. The role of missionaries is both tragic and essential to the cult's operation. They are used as pawns in a much larger scheme, manipulated to promote an organization that conceals terrible practices. Many do not realize the extent of their involvement until it is too late, and those who do rarely manage to escape. The artifacts found in the cult's temples are central to its ritual practices. These objects, ranging from intricate altars to small jewels and ancient books, serve specific functions in the rituals and in maintaining the connection to collab. Each item appears to be precisely designed to channel energy, amplify the power of rituals, or even summon supernatural presences. These artifacts are not merely tools but symbols of the cult's power. Altars are the most imposing artifacts. Constructed from uncommon materials, often black or red stone, they feature detailed inscriptions that glow upon contact with blood. During rituals, these altars seem alive, vibrating or emitting heat as sacrifices occur. Survivors report that the altars create an oppressive atmosphere, as if draining the energy of those present to feed something greater. Ancient books also play a crucial role in rituals. Bound in materials resembling human skin, these texts are written in unknown languages and feature detailed diagrams of rituals and symbols. They guide ceremonies, providing precise instructions on how to perform sacrifices and invoke collab. Only the highest-ranking leaders have access to these books, and their presence is viewed as a symbol of authority. Jewels and amulets worn by cult leaders during rituals also possess unique characteristics. Adorned with inscriptions similar to those on the altars, these items often glow or vibrate during ceremonies. Many believe these jewels amplify the ritual's energy or serve as receivers of collab's presence. Some missionaries who touched these items without permission reported feelings of dizziness, nausea, or intense fear. Ceremonial knives used in sacrifices are also considered highly significant artifacts. These blades, made from unidentified materials, feature engraved symbols that react during rituals. They are treated with reverence by leaders, who believe the knives can convert the victim's life energy into a form usable by the cult. These instruments are used exclusively by high-ranking members, reinforcing their symbolic and functional value. Each artifact in the temples serves a specific purpose within the cult's ritualistic system. They are not just instruments of power, but physical manifestations of the connection to collab. These items are both relics of past eras and tools for sustaining the organization's dark practices. Their existence and function reinforce the mystery and terror surrounding the cult. Andrew began his journey as a missionary, full of faith and enthusiasm to fulfill his role in the church. However, as his mission progressed, he started noticing inconsistencies and witnessing events that challenged everything he believed. He discovered documents detailing dark rituals, overheard whispers about disappearances, and eventually witnessed a human sacrifice. That moment was a turning point. He knew he needed to escape, but also that he had to expose the truth. Gathering evidence was Andrew's first step. He took photographs of altars and symbols, stole documents, and even recorded parts of the chants used in rituals. These efforts, though risky, were his only chance to reveal the cult's true nature. With each piece of evidence he collected, Andrew felt the weight of his responsibility grow. He knew he was dealing with something far greater than himself, but was determined not to give up. Escape was not easy. Andrew had to create false trails and vanish without leaving a trace. He spent weeks in hiding, moving between small villages and avoiding any contact that could reveal his location. The cult, with its limitless resources, sent people to track him down. Andrew lived in constant fear of being found, but his determination to expose the truth kept him moving. After escaping, Andrew began sending his evidence to journalists and human rights organizations. He wrote detailed letters describing what he had witnessed and attached photographs and documents to support his claims. However, many of these attempts failed. The letters disappeared, and the few journalists who showed interest soon gave up, apparently intimidated or bribed. Andrew's struggle was not only against the cult, but also against the emotional toll of everything he had experienced. He was haunted by the screams of the victims and the images of the rituals, which replayed in his mind every night. Despite this, he persisted, believing that exposing the truth was the only way to prevent more lives from being destroyed. Andrew became a symbol of resistance against the cult, even knowing his chances of success were slim. His fight to expose the church's secrets is a testament to courage and sacrifice, a reminder that, even in the face of unimaginable forces, it is still possible to resist. He knew the cost was high, but could not ignore the moral obligation to reveal the truth. Supernatural forces play a central role in the cult's practices, elevating it beyond a mere human organization. Collab, the entity they worship, is described as an overwhelming and insatiable presence. Although its exact nature remains shrouded in mystery, the rituals make it clear that this entity is not merely symbolic, but something that wields real influence. The connection between the cult and Collab is maintained through carefully orchestrated sacrifices and rituals. During ceremonies, many participants report feelings of oppression and inexplicable terror. The atmosphere in the ritual chambers changes drastically, with shadows that seem to move on their own and chants echoing, as if amplified by unseen forces. Some describe the sensation of being watched by something they cannot see, while others claim to hear whispers in unknown languages. These experiences reinforce the belief that Collab is a tangible presence during the rituals. The artifacts used in these ceremonies also exhibit evidence of supernatural influence. Altars glow, ceremonial knives vibrate, and amulets emit faint lights, even without any apparent energy source. These objects seem to act as instruments channeling the sacrifice's energy to Collab. Witnesses describe these phenomena as beyond human comprehension, further feeding the mystique surrounding the cult. According to internal cult texts, the entity Collab inhabits a higher dimension or parallel reality. The leaders believe that the temples act as portals, allowing limited communication between our world and Collab's realm. During rituals, the energy released by sacrifices is said to temporarily open these connections. Some participants claim to have seen glimpses of grotesque figures or alien landscapes during these ceremonies. Survivors of the rituals often report long-term effects. Many suffer from recurring nightmares, visions of shadows, and a constant sense of being watched. Some believe that participating in a ritual creates a permanent bond with Collab, which continues to exert influence over their lives. These experiences leave deep psychological scars, making it impossible for survivors to fully escape the cult's impact. The involvement of supernatural forces is the most disturbing aspect of the cult. It transforms what could be dismissed as a macabre organization into something far more terrifying. The manifestations of Collab, both during rituals and in their aftermath, make it clear that the cult deals with forces that defy understanding, and that these forces actively shape its operations. The cult's practices not only destroy lives physically, but also leave deep emotional wounds on all who come into contact with it. Survivors, former missionaries, and even dissidents from the leadership report traumas that permanently shape their lives. The horrors they witnessed, combined with psychological manipulation and constant persecution, create a state of stress and fear that few can overcome. The impact is devastating and, in many cases, irreversible. One of the most common effects among survivors is post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Recurring nightmares, flashbacks to the rituals, and anxiety attacks are frequent. Many describe feeling a constant presence, as though they are being watched even after escaping. This paranoia is reinforced by the belief that the cult has eyes everywhere, making it impossible for victims to feel safe. Guilt also weighs heavily on those who managed to escape. Missionaries who participated in the rituals, even under coercion, often carry an overwhelming emotional burden. They blame themselves for not doing more to stop the horrors, even though they were powerless against the cult structure. This guilt often leads to severe depression, substance abuse, and in extreme cases, suicide. Additionally, the cult uses fear as a powerful tool of control. Members who attempt to question or challenge the leaders face threats, public punishments, and in some cases, disappearances. This atmosphere of psychological terror keeps most members obedient, even when they begin to suspect the cult's true nature. The manipulation is so effective that many cannot imagine a life outside the organization. Seeking professional help is a challenge for survivors. Reporting human sacrifice rituals and supernatural phenomena often leads mental health professionals to treat these cases as delusions or hallucinations. This further isolates the victims, who feel that no one believes their experiences. Without proper support, many live in seclusion, unable to process their traumas or find a path to recovery. The psychological and emotional impact of the cult is one of its most lethal weapons. It destroys the victim's ability to resist, trapping them in a cycle of fear and suffering. Even those who manage to physically escape continue to carry the invisible scars of their experience. Their stories are reminders that the horror of the cult does not end with the rituals. It lingers in the minds and souls of all who cross its path. Unveiling the secrets hidden behind the facade of faith and goodwill in this cult makes it clear that its influence extends far beyond that of an ordinary religious organization. The macabre rituals, the global network of temples, the unexplained disappearances, and the devotion to an incomprehensible entity like collab are merely parts of a complex and terrifying system. More than that, they reveal a force capable of manipulating minds, controlling entire communities, and operating in the shadows without question. Those who dared to escape or expose the truth faced devastating consequences. Many live in constant fear, scarred not only physically but also psychologically, with traumas that never dissipate. The cult does not merely destroy lives. It corrodes the very essence of what it means to be human, turning faith into a weapon of control and suffering. While the world remains distracted by the organization's charitable facade, the cult continues to expand, perpetuating its dark practices and consolidating its power. Its ability to hide in plain sight, operating among the desperate and forgotten, is its greatest asset. The silence of victims and the lack of public scrutiny allow this machine of terror to continue functioning unabated. However, stories like Andrew's and those of other survivors are powerful reminders that resistance is possible. Each testimony, each document revealed, each fragment of truth exposed is an act of courage that challenges the cult and brings its practices into the light. It is an unequal fight, but an essential one, to ensure that the hidden horrors are neither forgotten nor ignored. Let this investigation serve not only as a warning, but as a call to vigilance. Evil rarely presents itself in its true form. It wears masks, speaks soft words, and offers help when we are most in need. It is our duty to look beyond appearances and question the structures that hold power over our lives. In the end, this is not just a story about a dark cult. It is a reminder that, even in the deepest shadows, truth has the power to illuminate. It may be too late to save those who have been silenced, but it is never too late to fight against forgetting. For it is in memory, exposure, and denunciation that the light of truth can finally triumph. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this mystery captivated you. But I bet you haven't seen everything yet. Click on the next videos now to continue your journey into the unknown. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next secrets I'm about to reveal. But be careful, once you step inside, there's no turning back.